Hello, welcome to my new experimental channel called Morning Theology. My name is Aaron Parker. I have a podcast and YouTube channel called Morning Talk Show. And Morning Talk Show is conversations with interesting guests from just all over the spectrum talking about the human experience. And as I have made that podcast, I have just found my own personal sort of internal life, my own thoughts on philosophy and psychology and theology have evolved a lot. And I now have this theological interest within me that I think would be inappropriate to the Morning Talk Show channel, in that it really hasn't been set up that way. Although I think one of my guests did call it a theology podcast because we got into that. But I wanted a place where I could talk about my experience of theology, which is different than discussing kind of very specific theologians or ripping apart biblical passages. So it could be a frustrating channel if you are of that type of theological mind. I have found that I've just been evolving into kind of gradually into theological thinking. And so I kind of wanted to share that journey because, I just think it's interesting. And so what I wanted to describe in this video is something that I'm calling the theological turn. And the theological turn meaning the period of time during which I realized I was now thinking in theological terms, rather than purely philosophical or purely intellectual terms. And so I need to give a little bit of personal background information. I'm 41. I was raised by a Baptist pastor, and that was interesting in itself because I was always surrounded by theology. So when I started becoming interested in theology, I was in no way starting from zero. I was starting with a bunch of stuff just like crammed in the back rooms of my brain because I grew up with kind of a deafening disinterest in theology, which obviously in conservative evangelical circles manifests itself as shame. I had a want to be interested in the Bible, and to have an active prayer life and all of that kind of stuff. But it wasn't there, it just wasn't there. I did things like committing to pray every morning before school, early in the morning, just as for me, it was a Herculean disciplinary effort and things like that. And so, my dad preached like every week when I was a kid. And as soon as he started preaching, I would go to sleep. I would just instantly, my eyes would get heavy and I would go to sleep. And so that went on for a really long time. And then I had as an adult, I'm skipping way ahead here, but as an adult, I was working at a church, and I was like directing the music kind of at the church, coordinating the music. Not a pastor, very specifically resisted that title ever. And I had a spiritual experience, which I'll probably describe in another video, during which I felt completely released from Christianity. And the thing that was strange about that was that I had not had a lot of those experiences where God spoke to me and I knew what it meant in any way. And so I was like, okay, I'm probably done with this. It took a while to kind of get my head around that. And I thought, well, I'm becoming an atheist, certainly, because, if I'm leaving Christianity, there's not another There's not another religion waiting in the wings that I'm going to jump into. And of course, like everybody leaving Christianity, I thought Buddhism seemed really great, and it is really great. But I didn't go that direction. It wasn't where I just did not have that mentality instantiated into my head. And honestly, I was excited to be out of religion, because I had heard people say they left religion, but they kind of missed it. And I was thinking, man, no, I will not miss this. Like, there's so much cognitive dissonance all the time, so much confusion, so much shame, but not even shame, like fostered shame. I was actually attempting to keep the shame going because of this disinterest that I had in the Bible. And it wasn't complete disinterest. I had lots of nice experiences where scriptures were, impactful in my life. But as a theme, overall, I never picked up my Bible. And so then I'm feeling released from religion. I have a wife, and at that time I had one child. I now have three, and I just started. To be honest, I started thinking, and I started YouTubing. And that is totally ridiculous. One of my favorite people, actually, who I did discover on YouTube, John Vervaeke, cautioned against being an autodidact, like cautioned against teaching yourself everything. And so I recognize that that's an incomplete way to do things, but I also recognize that I had a full-time job and a wife and a child, and life only got more and more complicated. I wasn't in a position to take any courses like I wanted to do. This sounds so excusey, but I have some cognitive issues with reading the printed word. I've always had difficulty reading it. I can read aloud to people, and that's actually my best way to do it, but I wasn't in a position to read a bunch of dense psychological texts or philosophical texts, and I wasn't in a position to read them out loud to anyone. I wasn't in any groups or anything that did that. So YouTube was kind of the thing. I could have these YouTube videos going during my work day, and the nice thing about YouTube is it could either be a lecture you're listening to, or a podcast, or just a documentary that somebody's uploaded to YouTube. So any time there was a topic, I could kind of find something interesting on that topic. So that's one of the reasons I have a YouTube channel here, because I think maybe there are a lot of people in that position. I think there definitely are. So then, very slowly and very gradually, as I was released from Christianity, and I had this newfound capacity. This was the interesting thing. And I talked to John Vervaeke about this a little bit, that this spiritual moment that I had, where I felt released from Christianity, actually brought with it a newfound capacity to focus on a line of thought for a decent period of time, which had not been something I'd had the ability to do. I'm not saying that it actually was some kind of magical change in my mind, because I resent that kind of thinking, but I do think that the ideology of Christianity had been suppressing that ability to do that. So all of a sudden, I had this ability to kind of reason through things, whether I was right or wrong in the things I was reasoning. I've changed and grown over time, and I have sought answers, and I'm not always right. But the ability to just keep a line of thought, I'm quite sure I have some kind of ADHD, and so that was really great and kind of addictive. And then I noticed that I was thinking more about biblical stories, and I suppose I thought I was thinking about it in kind of a Jordan Peterson way, and Jordan Peterson had made those biblical studies, the psychological significance of the biblical stories, which was actually nice for me, because I wanted to think about philosophy and psychology, but I was full of biblical stories. My head just is full of those stories already. So that was really nice, really encouraging. I know that another channel, Paul Vanderklay, that I watch regularly, kind of began by commenting on this effect that Jordan Peterson was having on religion and theology. And there are a lot of people who have been sent down this pipeline to spiritual and religious thinking. So I kind of thought that's what I was doing. I thought I was just examining these things as nice mythology, kind of equal to any other mythology that you could read, but more familiar to me, so easier to access. And it's worth mentioning that at the same time, with a child and then another child coming along during this time, my personal investment in understanding these things, my sense of urgency and my longing and my yearning to be able to model a good way to be a human being to these two little human beings who needed it. That was a huge part of it as well. It kind of took the safety net out. And I'm so sorry about these notifications. I'm going to try to turn them off. But I think that's one of the things that I noticed is that emotion in theology and an actual kind of connection to the thoughts and the ideas is sometimes discouraged. It becomes a kind of an academic discipline. And that's definitely not the kind of theology that I started to move into. What I did notice was that I began to look at reality again as person-like, and it wasn't person-like like a very distinct personality, but it was something that I felt like a person revealed itself and had an influence on my life. And this came along with the idea that actually other people are not known quantities. They always can reveal things to you. You never fully know anybody. We're not transparent to ourselves, and that there's always this element of kind of this mysterious moreness beyond the veil or beyond the mist of our conscious mind. And so I started to think of reality in this way, not because of a requirement to do so, but just because to kind of almost shorten up the process of understanding things and life changing and changing myself. It just seemed to make sense to do that. I kind of dropped the idea of everything as dead matter, and of like at the same time I was interviewing people. I've interviewed lots of people on my podcast who have more esoteric or more magical or more paranormal ways of looking at reality. And from every single one of those people, I found inspiration to just treat reality in this way. Treat reality as though I am learning from it. Treat reality as though I and my family are nestled in it and it has an effect. And I call it a theological term because without meaning to, I kind of just recognized that I was thinking of spirits, as real, thinking of maybe the spirit of, you see these overarching spirits reflected in the tone of the public conversation on politics or religion or anything like that. You see these spirits taking shape, and while they are not, no individual or organization is in charge of those spirits or, operating them, they are seeming to enact a will and seeming to move. And one of my podcast guests Connor Habib was he talked about a spirit called Ahriman, who's kind of is one of the esoteric spirits, and you can read about Ahriman, but that there was this kind of spirit of feeling like you had a blanket over you. Just it's a spirit of banality and a spirit of resignedness, and you see it so much in society, to the point that any kind of investment in anything is seen as this wonderful, vibrant thing, because the general tone of a lot of society. A little edit there because I had to pause for a second. But anyway, I was talking about the spirit of Ahriman, and Rudolf Steiner is one of the people who writes on this. And over time, I just realized that I was thinking of these spirits as real, and not in a way that real, not in the definition of the word real, that means that it inhabits physical space, but I just couldn't say anymore that if these concepts that I am finding that are kind of presenting themselves in my own mind to me as alive, and I'm seeing their effect in the world, that they are real enough for me to treat them as real. And that's kind of the extent of my belief at this point. I don't have an active belief in angels and demons, but I don't discount anything anymore. And this is a theological / magical turn in my way of thinking, which will definitely put some people off, and for others it will be just the very, very baby step beginning of my journey. And there are, if anyone watches this video at all, some of you are probably already plotting out where I will go, and I'm open to, I will leave the future open as to where I go. I'm calling this a theological turn because I keep saying term. I'm calling this a theological turn because I now don't treat reality and the human condition and consciousness as something that I am approaching as an intellectual pursuit alone. I don't approach it as something where I'm going to find a Messiah, a writer or a thinker or a speaker that is going to lay it out for me, and I will just magically choose to believe that and apply it to my entire way of thinking. Because I think that is something that people honestly think that they do, and I thought that I was doing that, where I was just taking an ideology that sounded right. If everything kind of measured up, or even if it didn't, I could somehow put that ideology into my head, put those things into myself. And that seems actually much more magical. That seems much more ludicrous, actually, than starting to treat some of these identified non-physical things like God or Jesus or Ahriman or, whatever, starting to treat them as real because I am seeing actual change in me when I do so. Seems a lot less kind of magical in the derogatory way, in the pejorative sense, than actually thinking that I can take on new systems of thought and just bring them on board. That's not been my experience. This has all been evolutionary, and it's all been very slow. And And so, yeah, I'm calling it a theological turn because there are now entities in my thinking aside from merely the intellectual. And actually, you could think of the Adam and Eve story at the beginning of the Bible as a kind of an anti-theological term, because the eating of the apple by Adam and Eve is could be an illustration of people taking their intellect and trying to take the reins of their lives and their movement through reality in a way that actually rejects the input of these things from the outside. In their case, it was God, and I think my beliefs now are that it is God. I'm not nailing God down to exactly what God is or must be or must do, but yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of petering out there, but this is why I'm calling it a theological turn. I hope this is interesting. My intention with this channel is actually to make contact with people who have a desire to discuss these things, and either in comments on this video or actually talking to me. I'd be open to having conversations about this. The difference between this and morning talk show would be that it could really be anybody. Like morning talk show, I've typically tried to get people who have some kind of an audience, and then I try to kind of get into understanding that person, their viewpoint, and what they're kind of adding to the larger conversation of humanity. But this one is more personal, and so if you're someone who thinks theology isn't personal, or theology really should be something taken on verse by verse, or if you're someone who believes that the Bible is not only the inerrant word of God, but the Bible is something that we actually know what it says about every issue, we can talk, because I'm not going to specify what I will believe in the future. My goals, when I started all this and when I felt released from Christianity originally, was that my love for my family and my love for, my friends, my ability to be a good friend, shouldn't decrease. And if I noticed that if I noticed that I was more self-centered, less focused on others, then I was going to kind of, I don't know what I was going to do, but pull the plug in some way, like maybe even just try to get back into the type of Christianity I had left behind, because, there were stakes. I couldn't lose my family. I couldn't lose my wife or my relationships. Yeah. Comment, like, subscribe, and hopefully we can have a conversation about all this stuff. Thank you for watching.